On this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly, let's flip through a Japanese gaming magazine, Mega Drive Fan, issue number 18 from July of 1991. All right, so today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to be, we can't say reading through, but flipping through a Japanese video game magazine. In this case, as I said in the intro, this is Mega Drive Fan. I believe if I did my math correctly, this is issue number 18, and it is from July of 1991. Mega Drive Fan was an independent, Sega Mega Drive centric magazine that started back in 1989. And I think in 94, transitioned into being Saturn Fan. And then in, I think, 98, transitioned again into being Dreamcast Fan. But really, it's all the same magazine. They would just change the name of the magazine to go along with whatever console Sega had out at the time, which of course makes sense. This magazine was sent into the show by Jordan, who goes by Buster D online. So I want to thank him very much for doing that. You can see on the cover here, obviously we can't read any of it, just in case that's not clear. I do not read or speak Japanese, so I will not really be able to translate too much of this stuff. But we can see on the cover, we've got Sonic the Hedgehog here. Interestingly, Sonic the Hedgehog was released in the US before it was released in Japan, which I don't know what that really has to do with the cover here, except that I think it was released here in the US in June. So by the time this magazine was on the newsstands in Japan, we already had the game out here. And then we can at least see, because it's written in English, that they mention the CD-ROM. So they're going to be talking about the Mega CD console. And I thought it was kind of interesting up here. Hyper exciting visual game magazine. I don't know why. Everything, it seems like in Japan, everything has to be over the top, right? It's not just a visual game magazine. It's an exciting visual game magazine. And it's not just exciting, it's hyper exciting. But, you know, if Sega Genesis and Sega Mega Drive games aren't hyper exciting, I just don't know what is. Inside the front cover here, you can see we've already got an ad for Sonic the Hedgehog. Not really sure why it's on the beach. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And then they even say here, new hero, right? Because this is going to be a new character, like mainstay character on the Mega Drive and a new mascot. And they've only got the 3 little screenshots there, which seems a little bit weird, but that's okay. And then over here, they're telling you the release date and the price. So like the little symbol after the 7 there indicates that that's a month. So that's saying it's July, and then the symbol after the 26th indicates a date. So that means July 26th. And then the price is going to be 6,000 yen. That symbol there is like the word yen rather than the symbol for yen, which is like the Y with the 2 like horizontal lines going through it. So coming out July 26th, for 6,000 yen, which is about $60. Here's the table of contents, which we don't read in English, so we're definitely not going to read in Japanese. And then here we get into a quick preview of the Mega CD. I don't remember exactly what this says up here, but it says something like, scoop or like hot news or something like that. I guess this must have been like hot off the presses, but there it is, the Sega Mega CD. You can see it doesn't look quite like what the finished product was, even on the Mega Drive, but it's pretty close. I would say this one looks a little bit cooler. And I don't know if you can see, over the camera, but you can kind of tell that some of this was actually hand drawn, if not all of it. So this is not like a photograph of some sort of prototype hardware or anything like that. And then I don't really know, again, I can't read this. They're showing this little screenshot down here of the bonus stage from the first Sonic the Hedgehog, which I don't know what that has to do with the Mega CD, but okay. And then over here, again, I don't know what this says, but this has a little screenshot of Ernest Evans, which was a very early Sega CD game. I was trying to look for like a mention of a price or anything like that, but if it's in here, it's not standing out to me. And then we get into a longer form preview of Sonic the Hedgehog. For whatever reason, I don't remember why exactly, on a live stream, I did a playthrough of the Japanese version of Sonic the Hedgehog, because people consider the Japanese version to be sort of the most complete version of the game. It's got, like extra layers of parallax scrolling and whatnot. It's really not that much different. And it's the kind of thing that maybe 90% of people wouldn't even notice unless somebody else pointed it out to them. But, and then, so over here, a lot of the same things you would see in a North American game magazine, you see here. So they've got like this little box in here of sort of vital statistics. So here again is the release date, the release price. That's the size of the ROM. So it's a 4 meg cartridge. And then here, instead of saying it's a cartridge game, they say it's a ROM game. So later on, if we see any CD games, it'll say CD or CD-ROM right there. The rest of it, I'm not sure what that says. I'm guessing one of them's the genre. One thing we can try doing, so this is sort of a fun thing that you can play around with at home, is you can install the Google Translate app on your phone. And then if we hold it up here, okay, so the first box, as I said, is a release date. The second box is like the developer or the publisher. So that actually says Sega. And then this is saying media ROM. That says genre action. And then that's actually continue function is what that says. And it just says continue. So I don't really know what that means. And then the last one there is whether or not the game has online capability. So so that's pretty cool. So I don't know if maybe the continue function, maybe for other games, if you can actually save your game to the cartridge's memory, maybe it'll say that there. This just shows more screenshots. And then down here, this is just sort of interesting that I can't tell you the exact translation of this, but it says something like interview with the team that made Sonic, or interview with Sonic team, something like that. But what's interesting is that you would think then that the picture they would show would be of Yuji Naka, but that's actually Masato Nakamura, who wrote the soundtrack for Sonic the Hedgehog. And they even mentioned down here, it says right there in English, "Dreams Come True," which so Masato Nakamura, was a member, maybe still is, I assume, a member of this J-pop group called Dreams Come True, extremely popular group in Japan, which I would assume is why he stopped writing video game music, although he was already in that band when he wrote the music for Sonic the Hedgehog. So now we get into this baseball game, and you can see just from this screenshot, this is a Namco baseball game. So I had assumed that this was like some kind of 16-bit version of World Stadium, and which, if I remember correctly, I think one of the earlier World Stadium games is what we got here in North America as RBI Baseball on the NES. But, I did sort of some digging, and I think maybe I used my phone to try to help me figure out what this is. This is actually this game called, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this correctly, Kyukai Dochuki. I don't know, but it was a Namco arcade baseball game. And, I loaded it up on my Mega SG and checked it out. And it is a fun game, but it has very cartoony graphics. If you want to, is that people say chibi or chibi or whatever. Very cartoony game, so you can see why it wouldn't have gotten released here. It was fun to play, though. They keep showing it. I mean, it seems like it's a pretty in-depth game. Of course, baseball, very popular in Japan. And then next here, we have what is obviously a shooter. And this is a game that we did get here called Vapor Trail. And, Vapor Trail's a perfectly fine game. This was a Data East arcade game that was ported to the Mega Drive by Telenet and brought out here in the US by Renovation. As you may or may not know, Renovation was just the North American sort of arm of Telenet Japan. So any Telenet games that were released on the Genesis generally were released by Renovation, like the Valise series or El Viento or Vapor Trail. And, this again, we're in the summer of 1991, which to me, at least, we're still sort of in what I would call I don't know, maybe the golden age of console shooters. But when I say that, I don't really mean golden age as in that's when the best shooters were coming out, but rather that's when like the most shooters were coming out. I would say the late 80s up through about 1991. And I've said this before on the show, but one of the criticisms that people will try to level at the Super Nintendo is they'll say, oh, it wasn't good at shooters, which really isn't true because there are quite a few good shooters on the Super Nintendo. But just in terms of numbers, there aren't nearly as many on the Super Nintendo as there are on the Genesis and Mega Drive or on the PC Engine. But the point I made before, and I'll reiterate, is that those systems were already out and were already established during this time period where there were all of these shooters coming out. So because of that, there are a lot of shooters that came out that were just sort of mediocre or in some cases even just bad. And Vapor Trail, it sort of falls into that category of mediocrity for me. Like there's nothing really super wrong with the game, but there's nothing really right about it either. One of the standout features for me of this game is that it has digitized speech. And, like if you watch the intro when you turn it on, it says a few things, but then when you get to the title screen, it says Vapor Trail. Vapor Trail. But then anytime you pause the game while you're playing it, it says it again, Vapor Trail, Vapor Trail. And so I guess they were very proud of the fact that they had this pretty clear digitized speech in it. But it's a cool game. You're like a jet fighter. It is vertically scrolling, which is my preference for shooters. And, you start off, flying above like cityscapes and whatnot, but eventually at some point you end up out in space. It kind of looks like you're fighting against Skylab here or something. I'm not really sure. It's a game that's worth checking out if you have like an EverDrive or something, or a Mega SG, or just load it up on an emulator. I have no idea how much the game sells for, but being that it's a renovation game, I'm guessing that it was maybe not the most common game. So like, Gyarus would be an example of another renovation shooter, and that's about $100 game. So next, here's a game that really needs no introduction. It's Bare Knuckle, which of course we got as Streets of Rage. And once again, in the US, I believe that Streets of Rage and Sonic the Hedgehog both came out in June of 91. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, because you would think that this would have been covered in this magazine a little bit earlier if that were the case. But I don't know. Again, what do I need to say about Streets of Rage that hasn't been said already? Once again, instead of having a picture of maybe the producer of the game, there's a picture of Yuzo Koshiro. So I guess even back then they kind of knew maybe who the standout star of the development team was. I don't really know. But, they're showing you here the 3 playable characters you can have. Over here, you can see that they're explaining some of the moves. I think you can kind of pick up what they're laying down a little bit. Like the grappling moves that you can do. What do we got over here? This is showing how you can, fight 2 guys at once if they're on either side of you. And then down here, they're showing the special move. Like in Streets of Rage 2, you could push the A button and do sort of a special move that would use up some of your health. But in the first Streets of Rage, instead of doing that, you had like a special weapon that you could only use one time, either per level or per life, that would call up this police car that apparently was a Lamborghini, I guess, and would shoot this rocket that, would sort of set off this ring of explosions around your character. I used to always save those for the boss battles. But, and here they're just going in, they're showing you the first few bosses, here, and here. And so I don't know if that's sort of maybe a partial walkthrough, like what Nintendo Power would do. And then we get into the next game. So this is this game called Wrestle War. And this is a game that did not come out in this country. It is a Sega game, a first-party game. I did load this one up on my Mega SG. And just to be very honest, I personally was not impressed with it. So I don't think it was any great loss that we didn't get it here. I wonder if part of the reason, I don't know if you can see down here, but they've got a character in this game who's just like an exact ripoff of Hulk Hogan. So, I wonder if part of the reason it didn't come out here is they were going to get into some kind of, licensing trouble unless they redid some of the graphics for the game and maybe they thought it wasn't worth it. Not real sure. And here they're going through, I guess, just showing you different moves, different characters. Here again, here's Hulk Hogan. I mean, you see he's got like the blonde hair with the receding hairline and the mullet, the blonde trucker stash, blonde trunk, or yellow trunks, yellow boots. I mean, that's obviously Hulk Hogan. Next here, so this is a game that, again, did come out here. This is Saint Sword by Taito. And Saint Sword, you know, to drag out my my well-used phrase, Saint Sword is a great example to me of a weekend rental. It's a side-scrolling action game where, you know, you just play a, you know, main character with a sword, and, you know, you just go around levels fighting enemies. Like, the levels are sort of, I mean, I guess they're linear in that you're trying to find the exit, but part of the challenge of the game is actually finding the exit. So the games are sort of, or the levels rather, are a little bit maze-like. And then you have like magic, like you can pick up sort of these little magic icons or something that allow you to transform your character into like other forms. Like they're showing you here, you can have the torso of yourself and the body of a horse. I forget if that's a centaur or a minotaur. But you can also change into like a flying angel. And I mean, I guess that kind of helps. Like when you're the horse, you can jump really high. And obviously when you're the angel, you can fly. But the game's definitely fun. I enjoyed it. It also has cool music. But what I would say is that I think it would wear out its welcome pretty fast. And so that's why I would say, like, you know, you could have rented this game on a Friday and maybe spent the weekend beating it. And then, you know, Sunday night or whatever, be ready to drop it back off at the rental store. But it's a cool game. And here they're showing you, like I was saying, you know, the level design is sort of laid out like a little bit of a maze. So, you know, this is kind of showing you the entire first level. And basically what you have to do is you have to find the key. When you pick up the key, that will unlock the exit, and then you have to find the exit. So like there's the exit. I don't remember where the key was, but yeah, but I don't know. I had fun playing the game for sure. And then this is a cool ad. So this, I had actually never heard of this. So this is an ad for the Sega Terra Drive.
2つの頭脳が同時に動く。2つの頭脳が同時に動く。2つの CPU が同時に動く。未来性のパソコン、テラドライブ。楽しい、賢い。
And what the Tera Drive was or is a basically a DOS PC, but it's only got like a 286 in it, but it has a cartridge slot on the front of it so that you can play Mega Drive games. So basically it's got a motherboard inside of it that is an integrated 286, you know, IBM PC clone and Mega Drive. And that probably sounds really awesome, and it is pretty awesome, except that, you know, remember that this magazine came out in the middle of 1991, and by that time, a 286 was pretty outdated. Like I had a 386 at that time, and even that was a little bit starting to get long in the tooth. The only thing I could think is that, you know, maybe that was to keep the costs down. I don't see in here where they are listing the cost, but you see they even have here 8286 and a 68,000 because it's got the Motorola 68,000 processor in it. And they're just mentioning, you know, it has DOS, Windows 3.0, which is cool, you know, but then they're just sort of showing it plugged in over here. So I don't know if you could actually do that, run AV cables out from the Tera Drive to a TV. But if so, that's pretty cool. I wouldn't mind having something like this just as sort of a curiosity, except that I don't really have room for stuff like that. Next, we get into some ads. Marvel Land did come out in this country. It's a pretty cartoony, side-scrolling action game. I haven't played it very much. What I did play of it, I'll be honest and say, didn't make me want to keep playing it. And then over here is Master of Monsters, which this originally came out. This was developed by a company called System Soft, and it was originally developed for the NEC PC 8801, I think, and the MSX. And it's one of these like hex grid strategy games but it's like set in a fantasy world, and you can like summon monsters. Well, you have to summon monsters. That's how you fight the other person on the map. I played it a little bit, but it became pretty obvious to me pretty quickly that if I wanted to actually play it, there's a steep learning curve. But from what I saw, it seemed like a cool game. Like it seemed like the kind of game where if I'd had it back in the day, I would have taken the time to learn how to play it and maybe enjoyed it. And then we have an ad here for Zero Wing, the famous Toa Plan shooter that gave birth to probably one of the first memes on the internet, right? The all your base or belong to us meme. Unlike most Toa Plan shooters, Zero Wing is horizontally scrolling instead of vertically scrolling. Pretty slow-paced shooter, but it's a decent game. I don't know why Zero Wing was not released here, to be honest. I mean, they released Truxton here, they released Fire Shark here, but this one did not get released here, and as we'll see later on in the issue, there's another Toa Plan shooter they talk about that also was not released here. So all of a sudden the quality of the paper changes for a while. Like this is like nice, normal, magazine semi-gloss paper. And then we get into sort of something that's, not quite like newspaper, but not a whole lot better. And, it's reader's voice. So I'm assuming maybe this is like letters from readers, but here's, they've got like artwork that readers have sent in. So that's pretty neat. I'm not going to have a whole lot to say about most of these pages. I will just sort of leave the page open for a second so that, anybody out there who does read Japanese, or even some, if you want to pause the video and check this stuff out, you can do so. Here's just more of the same, more artwork. Some of it's pretty racy, ostensibly from readers, and, maybe not. These are letters from readers down here. Here they're talking about the Game Gear. And then once again, I don't know what this could be an article about. Like, I don't know who these guys are. These, I think, are screenshots from Shining in the Darkness. And then down here, for some reason, is a screenshot from Dragon. I believe that's Dragon Quest. Oh, wow. There's a Japanese version of Dungeons and Dragons, the book. And then here, I don't know. Like here you've got, there's Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi, and there's Golden Axe, and there's Monaco GP. But I don't know what they're trying to show here. They mentioned the CD-ROM here. There's Ghouls and Ghosts. And then here they're showing some arcade controls. I'm not sure why. And then we kind of get back. So now the paper got better, and then we kind of get back to normal. So here they're showing this in case you can't recognize it. This is what we got as Ridin Trad. In Japan, it was called Ridin Densetsu, but it's the same game. They're showing here, it's coming out on July 6th, cartridge, 8 meg game, and the price was 8,800 yen. So that's like, between $80 and $90. So I don't know if that's because it's an 8 meg game. That would make sense, I suppose. I was never the hugest fan of Raiden. Like, they're good games, but not great games. I feel like I would love to play an original arcade version of Raiden so that you can play it in the proper 3:4 aspect ratio. Obviously, they like the game because it's getting a lot of pages of coverage here. And then here's a whole article about Marvel Land, which, like I said, I'm not saying if the game is good or bad. I'm just saying I loaded it up and it just kind of wasn't really doing it for me. So it's just not my kind of game. But, maybe somebody out there watching this will tell me that, no, it's a good game. You just got to give it a chance. I mean, certainly from the screenshots, it looks pretty interesting. And then you can see the staples there. So we're halfway through the magazine already. Here's Arcus Odyssey. Arcus Odyssey did come out in this country. I believe this was also a renovation release here. And the main thing I think about when I think about Arcus Odyssey is actually the ads in the magazines. Because, you remember with Gyrus, we got the ads with Jamie Bunker, professional gamer with the mustache and the mullet and the gold chain. But there was somebody else was in the ads for Arcus Odyssey. I just remember it was like some college age kid with glasses on. But it was probably the same thing. He was probably like a game tester or something. I've never played Arcus Odyssey, so I really don't know much about it. My understanding is that it's an action RPG, but that's really all I could say. Although now I'm kind of curious here. I want to use my Google Translate again. Yep. Okay. So June 14th, Wolf Team, 8,500 yen, 8 meg game again. ROM, we knew that. Yep. Genre action RPG. Continue function password. I like the fact that they put that in there. That's handy information in my opinion. But so they're just going to go through and show, some maps out of the game and whatnot. Certainly looks cool. I've just never played it. Here we get to another game that was not released in this country. This is a game called Advanced Daisen Ryaku. I know very little about this game. It's another one of these hex grid strategy games. It's a World War II game. If you load the game up, like the first thing you see as part of the animated intro is like full motion video of like Hitler giving a speech. But apparently this was an entire series in Japan. I'm not sure if we ever got any of them here or not. Then the paper takes a turn for the worse again for some reason, and we get way to the Sega fan. And, they have a section here about Sega arcade history. That much we know. The rest of it I'm not too sure of. But, here's Sega arcade history, 1980. How to play tranquilizer gun. And there's a samurai arcade cabinet. This, just looking at this really makes me wish I could read Japanese. I bet this is really, that's the kind of stuff that's right up my alley, right? Space tactics. Then we get some more info about the CD-ROM drive, I assume. I'm not sure who that is, but boy, that guy looks familiar. Hyper information section. I don't know what's going on here, but this looks like this must be, sort of like a report from some video game show. Maybe like a Tokyo video game show or something. I'm not really sure. Here they're showing a go-kart. That looks kind of neat. I don't know what baseball game this is. And then I don't know what this Sonic, or rather Sega Music Collection is. I don't know if that was like all I can see, it says May 29th on it. This appears to be, they're showing, maybe these are like some comic books that are coming out or something. I couldn't really say. And then this is some kind of card game. And then over here, new CD, books, and video. So that's pretty cool. But so I'm not sure, like some of these things like Blue Almanac. I guess that must be like the CD soundtrack. So Blue Almanac was a Mega CD game that we got here as, I want to say, Star Odyssey. So that must be the soundtrack because it's only 2,500 yen or $25. And that one, I'm not sure what that is. There's Rolling Thunder 2. Again, I think these are CD soundtracks for games. But then also down here is Metal Church. So obviously that's not a video game soundtrack. And then Lucasfilm Games. So maybe that's a collection of music. I have no idea. And then over here, they have this book on, I guess that's RPGs on the Game Boy. That would be interesting to check out. And then some kind of Super Mario World comic book, I guess. And then for video, I'm not sure. There's Dick Tracy, but 1991 would be pretty late for, when did the Dick Tracy movie come out? 88 maybe? I don't know. And these look like anime. And then here you have the weekly hit charts. So we would get this, sometimes this would be in EGM or it would be in Nintendo Power. So these are like the top selling games for each week, interestingly enough. Obviously, I can't really read what they say. I will tell you that this number one game for these 4 weeks in a row, that is Shining in the Darkness. And then one of the games down here, which one is it, is Midnight Resistance. And then I think that's Valise 3. But, yeah. And then here, so I think these are like the top 20 games that were like anticipated either by, I don't know if this was based on like the reader sending in the response card or if it was just from the editors. But so these are games that have not come out yet that like I said, they're the top 20 most anticipated games. And then down here, I'm not sure what the difference is. I don't know if this is like anticipated PC games. We can try pulling out the phone here again and see if that helps us out. I don't know. I don't think so. Or maybe this is games that they were... I think this may have been games that were on other platforms that they were hoping would be brought to the Mega Drive. That's sort of what I'm getting out of the translation. That doesn't mean that that's accurate. And then I don't know what this one is up here. Yeah, I'm not sure. Down here, this is a whole section just dedicated to shooters. So that's pretty cool. Tells you in what high regard shooters were held in Japan. Here, what I gathered from this, and I could be just way off, this is the reader response card, which, we always saw that in Nintendo Power. And I think they're doing some kind of giveaway here if you fill out your response card. And I think that's what this is picking out certain games to add to the response card. Here's just an ad for Ridin. It's weird. It even says Ridin Densetsu here, and then it says Ridin Trad. So I'm not sure. And then they're making a big deal down here about the fact that it's a 8 megabit game. And then they're even showing the Tera Drive over here. I guess just to remind you that you could play the game on the Tera Drive. More ads. This is 2 games from a company called Treco. This is Task Force. Well, it says it. Task Force Harrier EX, which I think came out in this country. That would be an example of a shooter that I would say is really not very good. It's sort of like shooter shovelware. I don't know. It's not horrible, but I played it and you're just kind of like, ooh, this, it's got one of the things I guess that sort of annoys me. It's got like very few frames of animation. Like when something blows up, it's only like 2 or 3 frames of animation. And it just makes it not look very good. And to me, that's just sort of an indicator of, maybe how much effort was being put into making the game. And then over here is a game called Street Smart, which is a one-on-one fighting game that, again, is really not very good. I'm not super familiar with the catalog or the, gameography or whatever of Treco. But if you were judging it based on these 2 games, you would say that it was not a very good developer. And then lastly, not lastly, but there's an ad here for Galaxy Force 2. Galaxy Force 2 it's a first-party Sega game, although it was ported to the Mega Drive by CRI. But it's a game that I had never even heard of, back in the Genesis days. It did come out here. It's a, first person on rails shooter, I guess, kind of like, Star Fox or something along those lines. And, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just really, to me at least, it's not that good. And then over here, this is a game that did not come out here. So this is called SD Valise or SD Valise. I don't. Some people say Valise, some people say Valise. Jeremy Parrish says Valise, and I feel like he knows what he's talking about. But that was sort of a relatively well-known series of side-scrolling action games that were made by Telenet Japan. And this SD Valise is sort of like a cutesy version of, I believe it's Valise 2. And I don't. Maybe if you like Valise, you'll like this game. I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of the Valise games. I would say they're overrated, but I don't. Are they really even that rated? I don't know. And then next, more ads. So this is this game for the Game Gear called the Berlin Wall. And I don't really know. They're even showing, like, I don't know, is that the Brandenburg Gate? It's some gate. In the background there. And, you play the game. It's a neat little game. It kind of reminds me of Ice Climber, but I don't really know what it has to do with the Berlin Wall. That seems like an odd name for the game, but whatever. And then over here is an ad for Blue Almanac for, I assume, the Mega CD. And then down here, they've got like a few other games that they're coming out with. But the one that just kind of stuck out for me here was this game, because that's obviously Mikhail Gorbachev there, which goes to show, it seems like in Japan they just have looser regulations about like likeness rights and control over copyrights, because you could never do something like that here, you'd get sued. But that's this game called Ganbare Gorby, which because we all referred to Mikhail Gorbachev as Gorby back then. I personally haven't played the game. I don't really know anything about it, but I just saw that and I just thought it was funny. And then over here, I don't know if this is a subscription card or what that might be. I don't really know what's going on with this comic over here. I thought this was kind of neat just because we would see a lot of these in the back of GamePro or EGM. This is just like one of these mail order businesses where you could order games from. Like they've got a list of NES games here. What I assume are some kind of CDs. I don't really know what exactly. I don't know if those are Mega CD games or PC Engine. I'm not really sure, but we see a lot of those in the back. Game Freak and Game Fan and BRE Software, like in the back of an EGM from this time period. And so here's like the little order form if you want to order something through the mail or call them. Or then they even have this little helpful map if you want to go visit their store. So this Hyper, I don't know if you're supposed to say Ultec or whatever, Hyper Ultec MD. So this was a book, Hyper Ultec MD, was a book that this publisher, the publisher of this magazine, released that was sort of like the Mega Drive analog to the NES player's guide. Just had like every Mega Drive game that was made in it. And so I don't know if the point of this section of the magazine was just to sort of advertise for the book and get people to buy it. But you can see here, I believe, again, that's Shining in the Darkness there. And there's, they're giving you just a little bit of information about the game. Over here, not sure what that is. That is, again, I won't say this right, QQ Tiger. That one came out here as Twin Cobra. That's another Toa Plan shooter, helicopter-based, still vertically scrolling. Pretty decent game, nothing too awesome. Not sure what this is down here. Boy, that sure looks familiar. Is that like Cyberball? I don't think so. I don't know. I'm not. I feel like as soon as I finish recording, I'm going to remember what that game is, but I don't remember off the top of my head. And then up here is Dynamite Duke. I talked about Dynamite Duke when I did the Genesis in 1990 video. I think I made some comment about how I think that was like the worst video game box art of 1990. Then we get into some Game Gear games. This is the GG Fan section. I don't recognize either of these games, but here, obviously, everybody should remember Outrun, or recognize Outrun, rather. Oddly, for some reason, this game was not released in North America. The Game Gear version of Outrun was released pretty much everywhere else, like Japan, Europe, Brazil, I assume Australia. Not sure why we didn't get it here, But if you play it, it just feels like you're playing, the Sega Master System version of Outrun, but on a handheld, as you would expect, frankly. Not sure about this one. This was a shooter on the Game Gear that I could swear I had. I didn't have a Game Gear back when the Game Gear was like current, but some years later I picked up a Game Gear, and I'm pretty sure I had this game, which is called Halley Wars. And honestly, for a Game Gear shooter, it's pretty decent. It was a Taito game. And then over here, this is Roston, if I'm saying that right, Roston. We got Roston on the Master System here, but it came out on the Game Gear, but that was a Japanese exclusive. Then we get into Tera Drive Fan, which really just seems like it's a section talking about PC games. Like here, they're showing Populous down here. I assume what they're trying to show here is give people an idea of what they need to look out for when looking for games that would be compatible with their Tera drives. Over here, they're highlighting the graphics expansion packs or add-ons for SimCity, which I had back then. There was the Ancient Cities and Future Cities add-ons, and I think later they came out with even more. Like this gave you 6 different graphical styles that you could use with SimCity: Ancient Asia, Medieval Times, Wild West, Future USA, Future Europe, and Moon Colony. And yeah, I had these, and I also had the terrain editor. Down here, they've got Sim Earth, and there's Test Drive 3. I don't remember I don't know if that, I guess that can't be Lynx 386, can it? I don't think that would run on a Tera drive, but I could be wrong. Then we get into the coming soon section, but see, coming soon MD. Here we've got Mercs, which is a pretty awesome overhead shooter. And then, of course, once again, Outrun, which it's kind of weird to think that Outrun didn't come out on the Mega Drive until so late. You would have thought that would be a much earlier release. Here they're saying it's expected to come out on August 9th. Here's Populous. That was, of course, the EA release. Again, August 9th. Here's Devil Crash MD. So this was the Mega Drive version of Devil's Crush from the TurboGrafx 16. And that did come out in the US, but here it was called Dragon's Fury, I believe. And then it had a sequel called Dragon's Revenge. I have Dragon's Revenge, but for some reason I don't have the original. I guess because I have it on the TurboGrafx 16. Not sure what that is. That's Wonder Boy 3, right? What is that? Wonder Boy and I want to say Wonder Boy and Monsterland, but I don't think that's right. I'm just drawing a blank right now. Over here, there's El Viento, which that was a Telenet game developed by Wolf Team, and that was another game that was released here by Renovation. And then down here is another shooter. This one is called, I believe, Master of Weapon, and I don't think that one came out here. I haven't really played it enough to even really have an opinion. This is some kind of pinball game, but I don't know what. And then down here is Galaxy Force 2, which we already saw the ad for, coming out on September 13th, 8 megabits and 8,700 yen. You can definitely see the discrepancy, like I was saying, about ROM size versus price, because like right here is a 4 megabit game, and it's 6,800 yen. Keep going here. This is Street Smart, which I mentioned whenever back here there was the ad. It's that Treco game. It's a one-on-one fighting game. Like I said, it's really not very good. Down here is Exile. When I think of Exile personally, I think of the Turbo CD. I didn't actually realize it came out on the Mega Drive, and it also even came out here in North America on the Genesis, which was news to me. Over here, what's the name of this game? Thunder Fox. This is Thunder Fox. It's a side-scrolling, it's like an arcade beat-em-up. See, to me, you can't say a game's a beat-em-up if you don't have any movement in like the Z direction, like with Streets of Rage or Final Fight or Golden Axe. This is more like Kung Fu, where you can only move left or right, but you have no like in and out movement. I only played this one for a few minutes, but I really wasn't impressed with it. Over here, that's Ernest Evans, which I believe Ernest Evans came out both as a cartridge and on CD. But as I said earlier, this was a very early release on the Sega Mega CD. Side-scrolling action game. It's kind of weird, like the way they design the game. Like the character model of the main character, who I guess is Ernest Evans, the way he moves, it's like he has all of his joints can like move, and they tried to give it sort of like realistic physics. Like, you know, if you're falling backwards or you're falling down or you crouch down, like the way all of his joints bend and move is supposed to be like super realistic, but it ends up making the game kind of clunky. But I mean, I appreciate what they were trying to do there. And then over here, we get into just some smaller previews. But here's another, I believe this is another Toa Plan game. Let me just double check that I'm not misspeaking. I believe that says Toa Plan. Yep, Toa Plan. So this is this game called Slap Fight. And Slap Fight not only was never released outside of Japan, or I should at least say never released in North America or in the West. It's actually a really rare game in Japan. I think they only produced like 5,000 copies of Slap Fight, and I don't really know why. I thought it was kind of a neat game when I played it. Vertically scrolling, but it has an upgrade system very similar to Gradius, where you probably can't tell from the screenshot here, but you know, it has all these power-ups on the side, and what you pick up stars. Like enemies will drop these stars, and when you pick up a star, it will advance this upgrade thing by 1. And like the first upgrade is a speed power up, just like Gradius, but you can upgrade to like other things like a bomb or being able to shoot from the sides. And I don't know, I mean, I thought it, at least like the little bit of it that I played made me want to play more. And so I just thought it was weird. Like, why didn't this game get a wider release? But who knows? There's some kind of Mahjong game there. And then there's Super Fantasy Zone, which, did that come out in this country? I'm not sure that it did. I'm not sure that it didn't either. This is, okay, so this is sort of like the release schedule, which, you know, we often see in other magazines. So, you know, again, that's the symbol for month. So this is just saying June, July, August, September, October. And I think that says something like, maybe it's farther off in the future. I'm not really sure. I think it just says like future releases, because what this says, this says something about like undetermined date in the future. And then this is listing off all these games. And then what these percentages are like the approximate percentage complete that the game is. But you can see that like the first half of this phrase is the same as that phrase. So I think it's just saying like these are just games that are coming out in the future. And then over here is the same thing, but for the Game Gear. And then here's the last page, just a big 2-page ad for Devil's Crash MD, which is a pretty cool game. I don't know what the Gals Club is down here, but, you know, whatever. And then there's, you know, a Technosoft symbol there, which is pretty, I always like their symbol, their logo rather. And on the back cover, that's just an ad. I mentioned that Ganbare Gorby game for the Game Gear, and that's just an ad for it. I guess that's the in-game version of Gorbachev. I don't really know. But yeah, so that's it. That is Mega Drive Fan issue number, I think, 18 from July of 1991. That's going to do it for this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.